So, Paul, how long have you been inventing?
I've been inventing as far as I can remember, around about from about 7 years old.
And what got you started?
Well, what really got me started is when I was 33, and I seen a product on the TV, and I just knew that that product that I seen, I'd run down many years previous. Me being so naive as I was, I found that product out and thought that all these other products that I had as drawings, I could probably make some money on, but it's not as easy as it sounds when you start doing it.
So how many patents have you to your name?
I have about 40 patents to my name. Unfortunately, what happened was that inventors are in a different situation to people that write songs or do copyright or design, because when you think of the idea I did in my early days, I was like most other inventors, you think somebody else is going to come up with the same idea. So you rush to the patent office to get it patented. I was lucky because I'd got a background of being an artist and being able to draw well and do mathematics. But even though I was dyslexic, but I could do all of those things, that I'd done really good prototypes, so I knew all the concepts would work. But I see a lot of inventors, they rush to the patent office, and what actually happens is they've not really thought the concept through, so they look so ridiculous when they first patent them, then everybody has a good laugh at it.
And how do ideas actually come to you?
Now that's a thing I don't know. All I can say is my mind, it's the only thing I can sort of like relate back to when I first knew that my mind would work the way it did is that I couldn't tell the time until I was 12. And in the classroom, a teacher that came in started to show us and said, this is 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, all the way around. And then she proceeded to tell us that there's 60 minutes in an hour and 60 seconds in a minute, and then proceeded to tell us there's 365 days in a year. And for the first time, what was happening to me while she was telling me, within 30 minutes of finishing the lesson, I'd worked out in my head how many seconds were in a year. And I'd wrote it all down, and how I'd done that, I hadn't used any right now, I'd done it. When the teacher seen what I'd done, because you're in a bottom class, you proceeded to say, you shouldn't be able to do that. So I was attacked for it. So everything that I started to do, I started to get attacked. That's why I excelled in sport, because I got pats on the back for that. But anything academic that I did, because teachers struggled with how did I do it, you know, at some point where I got the cane, and she just, and I realised how I'd done it. I told her how I'd done it. I says, well, I held that number here in this part of my head, and I held that number there, and this number there, and that number there, and I held them all over and brought them in as I needed them. And that's basically how I solve problems. There's all these different parts all in my head, and I just, when I see a problem, they all come together and start clicking, like a Rubik's Cube, you might say, until I find everything fits. Sometimes I get right to the very end. This happens in seconds, sometimes minutes. I get it wrong and I have to undo them all, and it goes all back again until I get into a working concept, and then I draw it down, and then I build it into a 3D model.
You've got to that stage. So what's the process then of taking that idea to something that can be patented and produced commercially?
Well, just taking the idea from that point, then in my situation and most other inventors, that's where it really does start, because I do all these things, but I'm not, I mean, I've done business before, but only on small scales. Nothing like having to deal with a product that you're going to sell or try to sell nationwide. It's a different story, and you need a different person to be able to take it from when I've got it to B, from B to C and C to D, and all the way along. And you need the people, and to get them people or get near them people, well, it's virtually impossible. And if you try and phone them up, which I have done in the past, you can't get by the secretary, so it becomes so difficult to get to the #1. And the only time you get to #1 is if you're sort of like at a function somewhere, and that's when you have the first opportunity. Well, unfortunately, when you get to that situation, you tend to babble because now you've got this chance. You start to go over the top, and they start to look at you and think, this guy's going to start raving mad. Because if you look at yourself, that's exactly what you're doing. You don't mean to. It's just that now somebody's gave you that opportunity to speak to somebody that might, you know, just by luck, by chance. And that's very difficult as well.
So do you think your dyslexia is linked to creativity?
Me personally, I do feel that. I do feel that it is linked in some way because a lot of the inventors that I've known are dyslexic. I think what it is because I've always believed that you shouldn't teach children to read until they're at least 7. You know, it's just one of my beliefs that don't teach them, let them be children because they're born into a 3D world. So they're exploiting looking at all that 3D world, and then what happens is, at 4 years old, they stick them into a 2D world, put it on paper, start to read. Well, you're starting to take away all their thoughts of imagination and everything, because now you're giving them a book or anything where there's a story already in it. So the imagination starts to disappear. Whereas if there's no words, and I can only go on the fact that when I was younger, that because I couldn't read until I was 12, all the Beano and Dandy comics, there was all writing on it, but I had to imagine everything that was going on, and that helped my imagination greatly. And you'll find that I think a lot of people that can't read it does the same thing.
So I guess you're saying that inventors are born, not made, is that right?
You can get people to understand the inventive process for looking for problems, and what normally happens if a company says to another company, look, we want a big machine building, and there's not one like it in the world, then usually you get quite a lot of people together, all working together to try and solve the problem of how can we make this work. So they all can solve the problem, but somebody's had to identify a need for them first. Whereas me in particular, I just see needs absolutely everywhere. I just see them everywhere.
So how many of your inventions have been turned into commercial products?
Into commercial products, 5. But all the rest, it just costs so much money to put them onto the market.
And which of your many inventions are you most proud of?
The fuel can and the watering can, and the reason I say that is because they do so much for the environment as well as the people that use them. Like as I said, the fuel can itself, because it's just like a tap, you can, as you know, you can empty it in 15 seconds or you can fill a thimble with it. And it keeps it always clean, and even if you fall over with it while you're using it, it's a dead man's handle, it stops. So the health and safety was there, and it cuts emissions down on other fuel cans. Your normal fuel cans you buy at the gas station is around about 90%. Well, I mean, it's worked out that if 1 million people used that fuel can just once, now you look at this, just once a day, it's the equivalent of something like 9 tons of CO2 which is saved, and that is equivalent to 105,000 cars off the road for 24 hours.
So is inventing something you'll ever give up?
No, until my mind goes. I can't stop. It'll never stop. I just can't help it. It's something that I just do, and I just solve the problem. I mean, what would be an absolute brilliant thing for me was to be able to have enough money to have sort of like 5 or 6 designers working for me, so I didn't have to keep going to the designers and explaining to them, this is how I want it, the thing. And then I could work on probably 10 or 12 products a year rather than just one all the time. The island does attract creative people because a lot of them, they probably won't like me for saying this, but I think what it is, because the wages on the island are not as great as what they are on the mainland, I think that creates people to become creative, really more creative, because they've just not got enough time or money or the work, they just seem to be able to come up with different ideas that they see and they follow them. And we have, per head of population, the island is got the most per head of the population than the rest of the country.
What, of inventors?
Of inventors, yeah. I mean, it took me, when I came to live on the island, it took me about 5 years to get used to it. But now I won't go anywhere else.